Hi, and welcome back to Tales of the Gulag, my case against the ALP, Part 6, Labor's War on Our Kids. If there is one area of Labor policy that should get us going, it is Labor's war against our kids via programs like Safe Schools and Respectful Relationships, and by proposals to outlaw so-called conversion therapies. My interest was first piqued by an article about safe schools that I saw in I think it was the Australian several years ago. I was disturbed by it, and so I checked out the Safe Schools website, and yes, it promoted homosexuality and actually indoctrinated children to be gay activists. Of course, all dressed up as an anti-bullying program. Well, actually, I think back on the actions of the Gallop Labor government in Western Australia, Labor government around about the year 2000, when they allowed homosexuals to teach in state schools. Back then I thought they are handing our children over to the gay lobby, and it turned out that I was completely correct. This matters because this is our children we are talking about. This goes deeper than merely discussing the economy, the environment, or social welfare, as important or as useful as these may be, because this is a direct attack on the ability of parents to raise their children according to their own beliefs and values, while a select group of individual activists seek to impose their beliefs and values on the rest of us to the detriment of our children. A key to understand Labor's policies are the Yogyakarta principles, which are endorsed over and over again throughout the national policy draft. A simple Google search of the Yogyakarta principles will allow you to read them. They're not a hugely long document, but they are so important. You and your children are increasingly going to be forced to accept so-called gender theory. Gender theory posits that sex and gender are separate. Actually, the two words are just synonyms, meaning the same thing, referring to the fact that we are men and women, but gender theory tries to separate them. So, according to this theory, sex is the biological aspect of your being, while gender is what is in the head. And hence they love to talk about one's sex being assigned at birth and that one's gender can be misassigned. What? Did your doctor flunk medical school that he couldn't work that one out? So, we are taught that gender is fluid. You can be a man one day and a woman the next. Well, not the last time I ever looked. So under this theory, there are not two genders, man and woman, not just three genders. The fact is there are many figures given for the number of genders that exist, and in fact, nobody can tell you how many genders there are. But each have their own pronouns, which will be mandated under Labor policy. And we already see something of this in various employer policies in these areas. So this is the stuff that will mandate that a man sentenced to prison will be assigned to a women's prison if he simply calls himself a man. This is not something I made up. It's there in Yogyakarta, which the ALP endorses again and again. This is where male athletes can compete in women's sport if they have undergone a sex change, because Yogyakarta, and therefore Labor, says that you don't even have to undergo treatment. Just claiming to be someone of the opposite sex is enough. And this is what our children are being taught and what we are all being forced to swallow? Well, this is what I happen to believe. Male and female, he created them from Genesis chapter 1 and endorsed in the New Testament by Jesus himself. And science happens to agree with us on this one. Mr. Shorten and others, I would happily take you to the back of the shed and explain it to you. I suggest you stand in front of a mirror and drop your pants, and that will tell the story. And if there's still any doubt, there is good old DNA that can help. So, Safe Schools and its equivalents was developed in Victoria by self-declared Marxists and is sold as an anti-bullying program. It is really about the sexualisation of our children. Children currently, from years 6 and 7, are taught how to masturbate, how to use a dildo, sexual perversion, and again the overseas experience shows us that they would love to reach our children right down to preschool age. Parents, grandparents, you need to be interested, because this is designed to turn our children into gay activists. It is designed to teach children to question whether they are boys or girls. Seriously, if you or I were to teach this stuff to children, we would be in jail. And then, on top of it all, parents are kept clueless about what their children are being taught. And so it is a direct war on parental rights. And we should take warning from Victoria, where their Labor government has made this stuff compulsory in all state schools, no opting out, and it is Labor's stated goal to force Christian and other faith-based schools to teach gender theory too. Further, when our kids start to question their gender in any way, Labor proposals will force parents to affirm their chosen gender. No joke. As will teachers. Failure of parents to do this is to be considered child abuse. And what happens to abusive parents? They lose their children. You think I'm exaggerating? This is already happening in Canada under these same sorts of laws. Added to that, there is a growth industry now funded by taxpayer money of giving children double mastectomies and castrations for those that those in charge suspect may be transgendered. That's right. If little Johnny wants to wear a dress or play with a doll, they reserve the right to cut his gonads off, and the parents will have no say in the matter. No joke. Because gender dysphoria is fast becoming a growth industry with government money, our money. Interestingly, a study by Brown University in the US showed that where transgenderism is taught and made cool, the incidence of transgenderism shoots up. Surprise, surprise. But of course, the truth is offensive to the LGBT whatever activists, and so the study was pulled down. Again, ideology trumps truth. Added to that, there's the proposed criminalisation of those who attempt to help children to see that they are what they are. This comes under the label conversion therapy. Whether you are a doctor, a teacher, a psychologist, a pastor, anybody who attempts to help their head line up with a body could lose their job, their children, their licence to practice, possibly go to jail. And of course, the real victims of this will be our children. And you know, I have a problem with that. Children's sexuality is a process of development. Okay, there are also things implicated like hormones and maybe some genetic factors, but it is essentially a process of development. Before age about 3 or 4, little children have little concept of gender. And then at some point they realise that they are either a boy or a girl. So the next question may well be, what is life like for the other side? As teenagers, it is quite common to be uncomfortable with their bodies, and experimenting with cross-dressing can and does happen. But Labor proposals mean that when this happens, they will be told that they are transgender and they need to get sex surgery and hormone treatment. I suggest you watch any of the talks by ex-transgender man Walt Heyer. That's Walt, W-A-L-T, Heyer, H-E-Y-E-R. He's a fascinating case. It's a study of how this stuff develops and how he overcame it. He too went through surgery to become a woman. He went through depression, alcoholism, and attempted suicide. That is, until he fell in with a Christian church which loved him, cared for him, supported him, and prayed for him. And then he came to accept himself as God had made him, and he is much happier. Of course, this did not involve any bizarre rituals or exorcisms, the sort of stuff that the left claims is conversion therapy, but it was simply applying love and prayer. And it changed his life for the better. A psychologist will use therapies that are perfectly acceptable in other areas, but are now to be considered harmful in the case of dealing with LGBT. And this is not even necessarily trying to, say, turn a gay man straight. It is simply trying to help, say, teenagers, for example, to come to terms what side of the fence they are on. But you see, Labor wants to deprive our kids of any help at the time when they are questioning their sexuality or gender. And woe betide those who try to help them think the issue through, whether you are a teacher, pastor, doctor, psychologist, or parent. Their program mandates that we all affirm them in their, quote, chosen agenda. This, of course, will make them prey to those who do not care about their welfare, but are hell-bent on pursuing a bent ideology at all costs. And it will condemn our children to a lifetime of misery and possible suicide. And if that's not war on our kids, then what is? One statistic that you are not told is that more than 2/3 of those who identify themselves as LGBTI as teenagers no longer do so by the time they are in their 30s. You're not told that for some reason. What you are told is that apparently LGBT is incurable. To be fair, when the draft policy went before the ALP National Conference in December 2018, the Australian Christian lobby managed to get some 60,000 signatures to remove some points regarding conversion therapy. I have as not yet been able to track down the final version of the policy platform. Maybe the typing pool at ALP headquarters is just slow. But I doubt that these contentious points were removed because they suddenly realised it was a bad idea. I would suggest that Labor remains committed to Yogyakarta. They just don't want it to be an election issue, because indications are maybe they might lose if it were. And this war on our kids ought to be an election issue. It is the happiness and the welfare of our children, after all, and their ability to grow up and live a full life as adults that is at stake. The alternative is totally anti-science. It is a place where ideology trumps science. The alternative is to condemn our children to a life of suicide, to confuse them at a time when they look to their elders for guidance for life. And yes, children do appreciate and thrive when they have proper guidance from their parents. The alternative is to silence free speech, to suppress Christianity and the freedoms of others, to break up families. Labor is on the side of the bullies and the thugs, and I only know one way to deal with these types, and that is to stand up to them. I'm fine to be nice to that gay guy. I, for one, am never going to celebrate their agenda as a part of God's plan for us. And when they go for our children, then we need to push back.